evening, everyone. My name is Nick Markarian. I'm the superintendent, and we're really glad to see all of you folks out here. I see some students and parents and faculty, so this is really awesome. We have some board members with us tonight, and we're just really privileged to have the opportunity to talk to everyone here and to really just take an opportunity to have a dialogue, to have a dialogue about the Ridge High School master schedule. So just to kind of frame things a little bit and put things into context a bit, we have been talking about the Ridge High School master schedule off and on for 10 years. It's been quite some time. Over the past year, starting last fall, we worked on a strategic plan. Some of you might have actually come into this space right here where we worked on a strategic plan over a few different meetings, and then we put it all together, wrote up some goals, and one of the things that was key in that strategic plan was, in fact, to try to take a look at some things that might make for a little bit more of a relaxed, less stressful environment, and improve the overall climate and culture, not just for our students, but also for the staff in the building. So we've been having a lot of conversation over the years also about professional learning communities, and one of the things that we've really been challenged by is the current master schedule at Ridge in creating that time for staff, because we really believe in the value of creating some professional time for our staff to be together, in particular by department, or at least by groups of teachers that are teaching the same courses, so that they can collaborate and do the best they can for the benefit of the students. Okay? So I'm stalling a little bit, trying to wait for nameplates to arrive, but they're not going to get here at the time. So we're just going to go through this very quickly. We have several board members that I want to introduce over here on the right. We're starting with Jen Horn, Linda Woolridge, our board president, Rob McKeon, is here. Jen White is here. Karen Richmond, Karen Gray, our board vice president, and Suzanne Schaefer. So I just wanted to thank them for coming tonight. We do have, obviously, our formal Board of Education meetings, and we have to advertise those meetings. In fact, as part of the Open Public Meetings Act, to make sure that the public is aware of any official business that the Board of Education is conducting. And by official business, we're talking about voting for things and having resolutions and so on, where the board is actually taking action. Tonight, the board is not taking action on anything. There is no particular formal votes on any action items, so there's no particular Board of Education meeting agenda tonight. However, whenever we have a quorum of the Board of Education, we do have to advertise and let the public know. So you may have noticed that in our Board of Education meeting schedule, we did include these ET Connect meetings because we wanted to make sure that if the full board wanted to come, they were certainly welcome to come, and it wouldn't create a problem. So that is just a thank you and a shout out to our board for their extra commitment in coming to some extra meetings as they would like to do. So thanks to our Board of Ed members. Also, I want to thank our teachers. I see we have a bunch of teachers here. I see we have some students here. And I really appreciate you guys coming out because we really need to work together. We want to hear what you guys think and have to say. And finally, we have our administrative team. All these folks have been working to contribute on trying to make some progress in coming up with a better mousetrap, if you will, for the Ridge High School master schedule. We have Drew Krause, the Ridge High School principal, here with us. Neil O'Connell is our director of special services. Tom Nizyak is our supervisor of science. Kristen Fox is our assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction. Stephanie Smith is here. She's our director of school counseling. And Sherry Howard is one of the assistant principals here at Ridge High School. Back in the back there, Mr. Fackman is our supervisor of fine and practical arts, and he's rescuing me with the Board of Education nameplate. So
as long as no one else shows up, we're good.
So I appreciate that, Michael, so that we don't have to continue practicing making Okay, thanks, Mike. So without further ado, let's get started here. Let's see if we have the technology working well. For our format tonight, basically what we want to do is kind of share what we've been working on, share with you what we're thinking, and just ask for you to ask questions, give us some feedback, maybe think of some things that we haven't thought of yet. This process is a giant work in progress. We are looking at making this change not for next school year, but for the 2021-2022 school year. So we want to make sure that we have the time to do a good job and that we have the time to really come up with the best scenario that we can that really serves all of our faculty and students to the best of our ability. And we know that it takes time to do that. I really have to thank these guys because just doing the regular master schedule process that they're going to have to also do for next year in the usual 9-period format is a lot of work that goes all through the winter, the spring, and the summer, and to simultaneously try to build another master schedule at the same time for the year after next year is a big undertaking, and so I really appreciate the commitment to trying to come up with something that's going to be better for everybody. So why a new master schedule? I alluded to this already a little bit. Briefly put, we want to improve the wellness for students and staff consistent with our strategic goals and strategic plan, right? Our district goals, rather, and our strategic plan. Right? I kind of alluded to that a little bit in the work that we did last year on the strategic plan. These are some statements that are actually from the strategic plan document itself and our district goals. The first bullet there is one of our district goals, and the second bullet is actually a statement from our strategic plan, one of our sub-goals where we want to take a look at schedule. And obviously this isn't the only way to work on wellness for students and staff. We've got a lot of other things in the works as well, but tonight we're kind of focusing specifically on how might this one change improve staff wellness and the culture and climate around the building for the staff and the students, and to help deal with some of the stress issues, because we know that that's a major factor for our students and also for our staff. So why? Well, we talked a little bit about climate and culture. We've talked quite a bit about the unit lunch. Ironically, we are sitting in the high school cafeteria. What the unit lunch offers in terms of an opportunity to do things with the middle period of the day, to create an opportunity where all kids can eat lunch at a reasonable time of the day, where all students have the opportunity to be with their friends and classmates that they would like to be with. The schedule that we're looking at, you're going to see, meets fewer times each day. So you have right now essentially a 9-period day, right? So the students have 8 class meetings. There may be a study hall in there. And then they have their 9th period somewhere during the day is lunch. So we're running on a 9-period schedule, roughly 42-minute classes. In the new schedule, the students would still schedule the same number of academic opportunities, right? 8 periods to work with, plus a lunch, a unit lunch. However, the students would only meet with 6 classes of the 8. So they call it a rotating drop schedule because each day you drop off 2 of the 8 classes that you schedule. So instead of meeting with 8 teachers a day, you would only meet with 6 a day. And obviously that has implications about the next day, because the next day you don't see the same classes every day, right? So from a student's perspective, there's a little bit less the next day in terms of the number of classes. There's less opportunity that you'll have as many evaluations, quizzes, and or tests the next day because there's only 6 periods instead of 8. So just by the virtue of pure numbers, you can't have as many assessments and tests on the same day. So there's that opportunity, I think, that the students would certainly appreciate. And then you'll notice the rotation of periods, right? So maybe some students are, shall we say, not the greatest at getting up in the morning and getting to school on time. If they're in that boat, that rotation of periods would provide that you're not always meeting with the same class first period. So it's kind of divided up, you'll see as we go through, between the AM and the PM, right? You have 4 classes in the morning, and you have 4 classes in the afternoon in your schedule. But you'll only see 3 morning classes each day and 3 afternoon classes each day. So those 4 classes are constantly rotating in the morning. Period 1 first, period 2 first, period 3 first, period 4 first. It's changing on a daily basis. And the same thing in the afternoon. At the end of the day, the last period is changing, right? So you schedule periods 5, 6, 7, 8, but the last period of the day is not always 8th period. Could be 7, could be 6, could be 5. So because of the rotation, the students at the end of the day, maybe they have some activity that calls them out of the building, maybe they are involved in a sport, maybe they're on a field trip, maybe students have regular meetings outside the district for some reason. By virtue of the periods rotating, they're not always missing the same thing. The other reason for the new master schedule is responding to survey data. We've had a lot of surveys over the last several years in terms of culture and climate in the school, student stressor survey. We did a survey in 2017 where we asked students a lot of questions about the master schedule. What stresses, what are your biggest challenges? What are the things that you struggle with the most? Academic load is the highest stress indicator that the students came back with. So clearly, it's significant for them. Improving instruction. Okay, so as we've looked at a variety of master schedules over the years, one of the big things that we wanted to try to do for improving instruction was use time better and perhaps, where possible, create more time to be with the student. Now, depending on how things shake out at the end of the day, I'm not exactly sure I can promise that there's going to be a ton more minutes to meet with the students. I would say we'll probably get a little bit more meeting time for a given course with the students than we have now. But we also are going to be in a situation where any given period is going to be longer than the current 42-minute period. So, oftentimes our teachers are challenged with a 42-minute period going by in a blink. And I'm sure if we move to 57 minutes, they'll eventually say that a 57-minute period goes by in a blink. But you can still do more in 57 minutes than 42 minutes in terms of the activities that you might choose to do with the students. So I think you get a broader spectrum of the kinds of pedagogy that you might be able to do in the class when you have a little bit longer meeting time. Okay? So that's why longer instructional periods is a reason there. And of course, the better use of time, right now, when you have 9 periods a day, a lot of time has to happen in order just for students to get from point A to point B as you do pure passing times, right? So if you have fewer times that you need to move from point A to point B to get from one class to the next, you save some minutes there. You can put that back into instruction, we hope, as we continue to work on this. Okay. So, what do we want the master schedule to do, right? We want the master schedule to be the how or the why, right? It's the vehicle for getting us to what we really want, right? And I think that that's really important for us to remember, right? If we don't like our schedule and the way it works, we should look in the mirror because we're the ones that make the schedule, right? So if we think that something better, so I know when I look in the mirror, it's getting fine. But I mean, listen, when you guys are dealing with something that you have to live with every day, but you have the opportunity to make it better yourself, you got to own it and say, hey, maybe we can do something better, right? And so that's what we're trying to say here. Hey, we own this thing. Maybe we can make it better and not be as frustrated with some of the things that we live with on a daily basis, right? So we want it to be the vehicle for getting to what we believe in, right? For what really matters to us. And we know what matters to us. We have our vision statements. We have our philosophy statements. We know that academic rigor is very important to us. We want to use time well. We want to have a positive climate culture, so we look at the context of some of the recent work we've done in the strategic plan. We know that's really important. We want to be professional and collaborative, and we know that the current schedule doesn't really lend itself very well to that. We want to create better professional time for the staff so that they can use their time better professionally to help the students. If we can make more of that happen, we want to make that happen. So obviously, at the end of the day, the goal is to use the time and the resources to help each kid reach their maximum potential, right? And that's what it's really all about. So with that said, I think you're up, Mr. Strauss.
Thank you, sir. My name is Drew Krause. I'm the proud principal of this high school, and I want to welcome everyone, just like Mr. Marcari did. Students, faculty members, thank you for being here, parents, board members, and the administrative staff here. What Mr. Marcari said is very true. This has been in the process of the work sort of being thought about for long before I got here. I mean, I went, research began on the former principal, Mr. Howland, from what I understand. And apparently he did and I linked it. All these presentations are linked here. I think this will be posted on the website for you, this presentation. He did a presentation to the board back in May of 2015 on this topic. The first time I spoke to the Board of Ed at a meeting was December of 2017. He did a presentation about a new master schedule, rotating drop, things we were thinking about. And then we actually brought in a consultant nearly a year ago, because we realized that we have a problem with space here at the high school and classroom space with the size of the school, the size of the student body, and the fact that we are now taking 9 periods that we schedule and we're scheduling over now 8 periods. And that creates constraints in our rooms. I think Mr. Marcari said at one board meeting, we're taking now 9 pounds and putting it into an 8-pound bag. And when you do that, you have room usage issues. Okay? So Mr. Merenblum was here nearly a year ago speaking to that at a board meeting, indicating, look, it was his measured opinion as someone who works on scheduling and has been in education for more than 30 years, that, you know, we're going to need more rooms here at the school to be able to fit a master schedule of this type by taking those 9 scheduling periods and putting them into 8. I think his assessment was he estimated between 5 and 10 additional rooms. That presentation is linked to it. Following that presentation in January, February of last year, just of 2019, myself, staff members, and students actually went on 4 site visits to schools that had different types of schedules. One was two schools, Chatham and West Windsor Plainsboro, had a rotating double drop schedule, one we're going to talk about here tonight. And Montgomery and 100 Central had what's called an AB block schedule. The difference there is that the periods are about 80 to 85 minutes long, whereas in a rotating double drop schedule, your periods run from 55 to 60 minutes. So we did the site visits, we got some data from the teachers and the students after that site visit, and I did a presentation as part of a board presentation on April 1st, reporting out on those results. And just, you know, quickly, the results were that the faculty members there believed overwhelmingly that they felt that the rotating drop was a better schedule. There were some that felt AED, but more so rotating drop. And the students believed that the rotating drop was a better schedule for them after shadowing students and seeing how the operation of their schools worked. And I think overall, I think about 80 to 85% of those that went on the visit believed that a new schedule of Ridge was advisable at this point. So no one didn't think it was not advisable, so I think that was also part of that survey. During the summer, Mr. Fackelman, Mr. Miziak, and I presented out to the Board of Ed in a meeting about the schedule also, and the fact what the next steps were, where we were in the process, some of the thinking on music and science and study hall issues that we might have. And then just recently in October, Mr. Fackelman and I went in front of the board at a board meeting and spoke about the mock schedule that we're building. We're basically taking student data that we have from this past year and trying to build an 8-period day schedule to simulate, to see what the pitfalls are and what some of the strengths that we have in doing that. So all of these presentations, and again, I'm not going to pull them all up for you, they're all linked here. Certainly something to look at, but this is work that's been done at least as far back as 2015, and going back even further, I got any of those presentations I think was done there, and moving forward. So there's been a lot of legwork that's been done here so far. That's all been shared out at board meetings, so I urge you to go take a look at that when you have the opportunity. I know Mr. Marcari just spoke about this current schedule we have here. Again, we have 9 periods a day, 42 minutes, which is a traditional schedule. We We've got 5 lunch periods scheduled. We have 5 lunches because we have over 1,800 students and only a limited space to feed them that we're sitting in right now. So it certainly does put some stress on our system. But this is where we're at right now. This is what we're looking to move on from. Here are types of schedules. Here we are, 40-minute, approximately 40-minute classes. We're at 42. Montgomery and Hunterdon and Central have full block schedules, meaning the periods I think are between 80 and 88 minutes long. They're 4 a day, and they're every other day those classes occur. So if I have math on Monday, I won't have it on Tuesday, but I will have it on Wednesday. So it alternates every other day. The one we're looking at right now, rotating dropping approximately 60-minute classes. 6 classes a day, as Mr. Markarian said. 2 are not taking place during that day, and then the following day 2 will drop out, and 2 will fill in. We're looking at this current model based on a number of reasons. One, I think, is the length of the classes themselves, I think is advisable. I think the frequency of when the classes occur is advisable. We believe that there's a lot of other schools that have this model that I've really spoken to, and some of us have spoken to, that are fully vested in this model and have been for years. As a matter of fact, in speaking to George Alexis, the former principal at Watchung Hills, he said we would never go back to a regular 9-period day. I think Darren Grow, who I spoke to at Chatham, and they've changed over 10 to 12 years ago. And also based on some of the feedback that we got from the staff members and the students when we went to visit the schools, because we visited both types of those schedules. So we're looking currently at this rotating drop model, which is right here. Okay, this is the visual of it. If you look, there's 4 days, A, B, C, and D. On an A day, you have periods 4 and 8 do not happen. You have periods 1, 2, 3 in the morning, 5, 6, and 7 in the afternoon. In the middle is a unit lunch where the whole school basically eats lunch at the same time. The following day is a B day. Periods 3 and 7 will drop out. The top 3 periods will rotate. Now it's 4, 1, 2, and then 8, 5, 6. 4 and 8 fall in, 3 and 7 fall out. So basically, what happens here is that in every 4-day cycle, you're having your class 3 times. Okay? And again, moving forward into C day, 2 and 6 drop out. 4 and 8, 3 and 7 are still in now. And then in D day, 1 and 5 will drop out, and the others will be present. And it's a rotation. So for instance, if you look at the top of the screen, 1, 4, 3, and 2, you know, every day a student walks in here, they have period 1 at the same time. But in this model, first period of the day varies. Same with the last period of the day. So in period 8 and 9, we have students leaving for whether it's whatever activities they have to get to, we have sporting events that go out. They're missing those same classes every day, whether it's periods 8, 9, sometimes 7. Here, this rotation at the end of the day, 7, 6, 5, and 8, and even above that, will create some variation, so we won't be missing the same class every day, every evening, or early for some school event. Okay? So this is really the basis of this rotation. I have it set up here as 56-minute periods, which is comparable, I think, Watchung Hills, I think, as I said, Chatham is 57-minute periods. The unit lunch is approximately 58-minute periods here, 58 minutes here. Certainly there are schools that have shorter time blocks for that unit lunch. Here's some challenges, all right? We're running a mock schedule of different variations. We have a scheduling team that's taking student data from last year, running it into an 8-period day, and seeing what we come up with to see if we can fit into this model. Challenges we're running into. Certainly, we have not making any final decisions on this yet. I'm going to tell you, we're going to rule out any B day if things don't work out with rotating drop, although that's our preference at this point. Running a variety of scenarios to try to determine what works best for our school, right? And every place we went, that's what they said. You've got to look at your school, what your needs are, and what works best for you and your program. So that's what we're looking at. What might work best in Hunterdon and Central may not work best here for us. So that's what we're looking at. There's slides I'm going to show you that highlights some of the things we're working through and our current thinking on those challenges that we have. We believe in running the mock schedule to make sure to see if things will work for us. That's one of the key components here. And again, I think Mr. Marcari referenced that this is sort of an open forum and dialogue. We'd like to have your feedback, your questions, and things of that nature. To have an open discussion about this. Okay, it's important. First challenge that we've obviously run into and that I've spoken about is classroom space. Okay? We want to provide educational opportunities for students that are materially equal to the current schedule, even though classrooms are only scheduled through 8 periods in the new schedule instead of 9 periods currently. So in trying to take that 9 pounds and put it into an 8-pound bag, we want to try to maintain the academic rigor. We want to maintain the opportunities for our students. We want to be able to maintain those electives that they want to take and not lose anything by doing it. Now again, as I mentioned, classroom space is an issue. It's something we're looking at. What can be done? Well, fit the necessary sections of classes into available rooms by increasing the number of rooms and or decreasing the number of sections of classes, or possibly increasing class size. That could be a possibility too. And these are all the challenges we're looking at in this scenario based on the available rooms we have here, the number of sections we run, the number of students that are here at Ridge, and the master schedule we're working with right now. Okay? So in some of the mock schedule runs we've done, okay, we took current class enrollments and sections. Scheduling success rate for the mock schedule is in the 60 or 70% range. And in 4 rooms, the planned condition that increases the success rate to about 90%. So without the 4 rooms, we're at 60 to 70% right now. That means how many student schedules, how many students can get the schedules that they want and that they've signed up for. By adding 4 rooms, we found that the success rate in terms of scheduling goes up to 90% versus 60 to 70%. This is some of the information we shared back in October with Mr. Fackelman and myself at the board meeting. So clearly, by adding space, it helps. All right, it helps because it helps to take that 9 pound and put it in an 8-pound bag. But if you can increase that 8-pound bag in size, you're going to have better success rate. We're currently also analyzing the most recent enrollment projections to determine if the success rate can be only contained from new classrooms. So again, are new classrooms the only answer? I don't know. We're looking at enrollment projections that we've gotten to see if that's necessary and how far we can go with that. So please understand that, hey, listen, we're not saying classrooms are the end-all be-all, but having more obviously helps. And I think that's what Mr. Merrin included back in December of last year. Okay, so these are the currently. Second challenge. Not yet, Mr. Exam. Unit lunch. He's ready. He can't wait. He's ready to go. Science. It is. He's ready. Listen, we view the unit lunch as a way to, as a good thing. I think all the feedback we've gotten from site visits and from other schools is that it's a good time for students, right? It's a good time for students to be together. A lot of the complaints we get is, I'm not in a lunch, I don't have any friends, I mean, I'm in lunch, but I don't have any friends in there, right? And I don't know where to sit or who to sit with. And that happens to kids, you know, we get that. But if you open a lunch to all the students at the same time, you can go find your friend and sit with him or her anywhere you want, okay? We want to take maximum flexibility for the unit lunch period. So what are we talking about? Mr. Marcari touched on this, professional learning. Right now we're challenged with staff being able to meet together to plan in like sections of courses because their schedules may not line up with duties or tutorial periods or their lunch period, etc. And they may be teaching at different times. This is an opportunity to leverage that unit lunch to get these staff members together to be able to meet and plan things they've been asking for years. Okay, and it's critical. Feed students simultaneously with increased food production capacity. Yes, with this facility here, which was probably designed for, I don't know, 800, 900 students, to try to feed all the students over 1,800 at the same time is close to impossible. So, you know, that's been part of board meetings about food production capability. Meet needs such as meeting times for students, music lessons, lab times, and tutorial times. So these are all things we're thinking about leveraging during unit lunch to be able to be more flexible for our staff and our students. So for an example, here we go. For eating spaces, and this is what I contemplate. Ridge can use the current cafeteria space, the old main gym and bleachers, the new gym and bleachers, to eat in. Now, this is consistent with other schools have done. So, for instance, went to Chatham. They have an old auxiliary gym. They roll out a tarp. They roll in tables. That's one eating space for the students that they use, besides their regular cafeteria space. They also open up their gym. They open up the bleachers. Kids go in there, sit in the bleachers, and eat. Okay? 100 and Central, same thing. They open up their gyms. They open up the bleachers. Kids go in there and eat. So, to me, there are spaces where we can create for students to eat, an open area in this building to accommodate them. Now, we don't have the massive hallways that I found at West Windsor Plainsboro that actually set up tables down the main hall that won't create a fire hazard, right? Some of our hallways, if you set up tables, you're going to have problems with the fire code. So we're sort of limited in that capacity to be able to do that. But I do envision at least those large spaces for students. And certainly open other suggestions as well. So what do we talk about in unit lunch? You know, the A, B, C, D days, you know, extra science lab periods that would fold into the science. Music lessons, professional time for teachers, tutorial time for students. I mean, these are all the things that we're capable of during that unit lunch period to meet the needs of our staff and students. And again, that's conversations that will be ongoing about how we're going to schedule that to leverage this unit lunchtime to its maximum. I mean, there are schools out there, from what I understand, that have students, advisors meet with the clubs, and things of that nature. And that's certainly things that we're talking about. Unit lunch provides a unique opportunity for staff to meet professionally and work with students educationally. Lunchtime duties need to be balanced with individual teacher schedules. So yeah, I mean, right now we have teachers on duty and cafeteria duty. We're going to need that during the unit lunchtime, especially in and about very large areas where people will be eating. But again, that's something we're going to have to look at with each individual teacher's schedule to be able to work that out. Faculty members may be provided either to supervise in the duty capacity, meet professionally in PLCs, and or assist students in tutorial time. So again, other options during the unit lunch, we can leverage that time to help students and staff. So here's just an example of possible schedule of staff during unit lunch. I mean, we could take, and again, this is just a formulation, nothing is set in stone. By department, we could have different departments have a lunch duty on a given day, while others are doing tutorial and others are meeting as a PLC, just as a particular example. That doesn't mean they're only duty or have duty during lunch that week. They may have an independent duty somewhere else. But by sort of rotating this is a way to create equity among the staff, to allow for tutorial time for students, for them to meet with PLCs, and for them to have a duty opportunity to help during unit lunch with students. And it's sort of a rotation. I've sort of split these as the math and business department, ELA, world language, social studies and the arts, special ed, and phys ed. As the departments, we can combine by number, and I've sort of looked at the numbers of those departments to split the staff evenly. Again, these are conversations to have with and among the administration and the teachers themselves. But here's sort of a snapshot of a possible rotation that we could use for a lunch unit lunch schedule for staff and students alike.
Now we're challenged.
Mr. Izzy.
Thought I was more important than that. Lunch is important. So I'm going to stand a little bit over here so Mr. Marcarian doesn't have to stare at my back. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. So as we look at the challenge of science, you're going to see that recurring theme of staffing. the instructional time, and then the classroom space. If you flash back to the two presentations from this summer, July 22nd and August 26th, we talked about what we call the stacking of science labs and the constraint that puts upon our current master schedule, where it's driving certain things to occur very heavily in periods 2, 5, and 8. So a different look on that does kind of alleviate that, as Mr. Krause kind of alluded to. What we're looking at with the CP conceptual science would be changing that up and not having that be a 6-credit class, dropping that to a 5-credit class, and not encroaching upon that unit launch. The CP mathematical and honors, doing that, remaining 6 credits, pulling that additional lab time out of the unit lunch. And then with the AP, we are facing some unique challenges as we continue to go through those mock schedules as we look at rooms and staffing. Do we do it with a mandatory study hall, or do we do it the same as the mathematical and the honors, or do we pull out the unit lunch? So kind of a side-by-side comparison. I know it's small, which is why I'm glad it posted to the website. Where we are currently versus where we would hypothetically go under this new schedule. So again, that top line, that CP conceptual, it is currently a 6-credit class, but we are projecting to phase that down to a 5-credit class and make changes with that course. Carrying that into the rotating drop means that that level does not pull out of lunch ever. Those students will simply meet the same as every other CP course in the building. At the mathematical and honors levels, still requiring that additional time. Currently, those are 6-credit classes that require one of 2 things. Students either pair their science with their phys ed, such that they have phys ed 4 days a week and their lab 1 day a week, or they pair it with a study hall, their personal choice. In that 9-period, 8-class system, they are taking 7 academics and a study hall 4 days a week with an additional lab 1 day a week. Those are the 2 ways that's rolling out currently. That goes away under the proposed schedule, where students don't have to marry their PE to their science or a study hall to their science, because it would simply pull from that unit lunch a portion of the time once per 4 days. And there's a graphic on that coming on the next slide. I just want to hang back one more moment on the AP level. The AP level, again, being posed with some different challenges. It's currently a 7-credit class. Every AP science student has to take a mandatory study hall. You cannot pull from phys ed twice in 5 days and still hit the state required minimum for phys ed minutes. So they are required to take a study hall where they meet the study hall 3 days a week, the lab twice per week. Students who then take 2 AP sciences hopefully try to dovetail that such that they really have 1 day of study hall, 2 days of lab for the one course, and 2 days of lab for the other. So that study hall is a mandatory function under our current AP system. We are looking at, do we still need the study hall, maintaining a 7-credit course, or do we change it out to a 6-credit pulling from the lunches similar to mathematical and honors? This is the hypothetical rotating drop schedule for a student in a conceptual level course that does not ever pull from the unit lunch. So you can see the science highlighted in green, the other courses somewhat grayed out, and we left it non-generic, just showing the 2 electives in the student's schedule as they rotate through. For the mathematical and the honors, we show how when the science abuts lunch, it pushes into a portion of the lunch to gain that extra time for some of those longer experiments. This is one consideration for the AP, with the other consideration being that students still have to take, as they do now, that mandatory study hall. And you can see there on the D-Day, where when the science abuts the study hall, we pushed an extra long period. So with the drop, you have 2 days of study hall, 1 day where it drops, and 1 day where it's that extended science period. Looking at that for a student taking multiple APs, as you do now, you would have 2 days of extended science, 1 day where it drops, and 1 day where it remains a study hall. From a numbers perspective, and I know I have some blocked out there when scenarios aren't a viable thing, You can see the instructional minutes currently for every CP course in the district, including the proposed change to the conceptual level, is about 7,500 minutes. We did the math at a 56-minute period to show that on that, switching to a rotating drop, the annual minutes for those 5-credit classes stays exactly the same. That was the basis for running those numbers. If you increase the period slightly to get closer to 60 minutes by taking away from the unit lunch slightly, obviously we'd actually gain time in all of those classes annually. Currently, the 6-credit science classes, the current conceptual, which we're looking to start to drop off of, the mathematical and the honors, are at 9,000 minutes and change. And the AP 7 credit is at 10,500. Under the proposed possibilities for the rotating drop, if you just back it to the lunch, you do get very close to where we are. You're looking at a loss of about 400 minutes, which at a current 42-minute period is about a loss of 10 instructional periods for 2 weeks by the numbers. However, the rotating drop is accompanied with fewer stops and restarts. So earlier when we gave a presentation, I discussed, imagine you had to paint this room. You would get it done faster if you did it in longer chunks of time and had fewer instances where you had to pack up and pick up again the next day and restart it. So there is a hard to quantify component on the new proposed schedule of being able to do more with less meetings because you're having a longer chunk of time. It's very difficult to quantify that, and such that we believe, based on the feedback from the site visits and many other districts using the rotating drop, that loss of these certain, give or take 10 instructional periods to the current schedule is actually negligible, and you get more done in those fewer meetings. The same can be said if you look at that bottom right corner where the AP ends up about 500 minutes short compared to the current schedule. It really becomes negligible loss when you account for the amount of time that you don't have to stop and restart. And that brings me to Mr. Backer.
I appreciate that, Mr. Science. Thank you. It's always about science, isn't it? One thing about science is they're all full of musicians and artists and dancers and theater people, so we like the science, and they know they like us too. So, challenge number 4. And we decided to call them challenges and not problems. Because it really is a challenge, it's not a problem. A problem is that we didn't have so many offerings and so many opportunities, and we certainly have those. So the challenge we have that we're going to be addressing is how do we handle music lessons and ensembles. And ensembles, music lessons, that's easy to understand, that's your band and your orchestral lessons that occur. Ensembles are choir ensembles, they require small choir training sessions that happen just like a lesson during lunch period. So the challenges that we have there are the staffing. How are we going to provide the staffing and make it so we can continue to serve the students with the ensemble training and with lessons within the staffing that we have? Time is a challenge for everybody. There's never enough time to do everything we want. So how can we make it work with the time that we'll have in the schedule? And space isn't a challenge. We have a challenge with space, whether it's for storage or for teaching, and that certainly has come up in this presentation and the previous presentations. So we're looking to see how we can best address those. So as far as what we're thinking right now, our ensembles, our ensemble trainings, and our music lessons all happen during the lunch period. That's nothing different. In looking at the other schools, many of the other schools, we're fortunate that we actually are still able to offer lessons and ensembles. Many of the schools, they either never offered lessons and ensembles, or they had to cut it when they moved to a rotating drop. We're committed, I'm committed, we're all committed to trying to maintain the level of service that we have with the lessons and with the ensemble trainings. And so we feel we can still accomplish that no different than we have during the lunch periods. Students currently take 20 minutes from their lunch once a week for a rotating lesson schedule, or however that works within their lunch periods. We feel we can do the same thing under the rotating drop, and we can accomplish that same task. Now, how do we make it work in terms of the staffing and the space? That certainly was a challenge on the previous slide that we're still working towards. So using that unit lunch period, We feel we can still maintain that, and because I'm not signed, we're going to make it work, so we're going to move on. You're doing pretty good, huh? All right. Challenge 5.
Special education.
Well, considering the challenges we usually have in special ed, I have to say this isn't too difficult a one. Okay, so that's a challenge number 1. So basically, we want to look at 3 areas in special education. We're going to look at our in-class support programs, our research controlled programs, and then our self-contained programs. So, the first thing we want to consider is that we want to make sure we're only providing the same supports and structures for all of our students and all the programs that we have. We want to ensure that we have our trained staff and enough staff members to address the needs of all of our students. And then when we look at the in-class support, there's actually more positives and negatives. For their in-class support teachers, they're going to have extra time to meet with teachers as needed if they need to. They have extra times to complete projects and assignments. They'll be able to have the ability to do some long-term planning. They'll also have the ability to be able to be flexible with different types of schedules. Some of our students can be a little bit rigid in their schedules, and when things change, it's difficult. But when you think about these students going on into life afterwards into college, they're going to have these flexible schedules. So this is a really good opportunity for us to work with them so they can get adjusted to those changes that might necessarily take place. And one of the big pieces of this is hopefully there will be time for teachers to plan our co-teachers together. One of the biggest concerns we hear from the special ed teachers and the general education teachers is they never have that time together. They're supposed to be teaching in a classroom, working together for all of the students in the class, and it's very difficult to find that common planning period for them. So this is definitely a very, very big plus. For our research students, it's basically the same thing. We want the same types of programs. We want to continue to develop those. We want to make sure there's enough space for our classes because we do run a lot of research room classes. So that would be something that we're going to take a look at. When we went over, Stephanie Orr, one of our supervisors, went to Chatham along with one of our teachers that teaches self-contained resource. And she said the report from Chatham was they love it and they would never ever go back to it. They said it was absolutely great. The students love it, the teachers love it. So it was really positive. These students would have additional time. They could take breaks during class. They could complete class projects. These are something that the teachers think would be very positive for the students. There's also that difference time between classes. So they're not having the same class every day. So for a lot of our students, it gives them a little bit of extra time when they're not having class to get an assignment done or to get maybe an extra project done or meet with the teacher. Then we come to our self-contained classes. And this is a little bit, most of our self-contained classes can form their own schedules. So they don't always adapt to the exact schedule that we're running here in the high school. There are 1 or 2 challenges that we might have to come across, and those are some things that we would probably look at. We'd have to work with therapists and maybe some of our special area teachers. Sometimes our teachers go between schools, so if they're on a schedule here, will they have the same schedule down in Annan? That's something we definitely have to take a look at. We have a group of students that go out to work, so we'd have to work with those students. Our postgrads, it's not an issue because they're working all day, but some of our other students do take electives, they do work, so those are some of the areas that we would probably have to look at. And the plus of this is our students would have the opportunity to have lunch with a lot of their peers, and a lot of them don't have that opportunity. And I think that's it. As I said, for us, that's easy.
Number 6, not schedule challenge, all other electives and core content. Our goals with this: maintain or increase instructional time, maintain robust offering of elective courses, leverage longer periods in a rotating schedule, and I think that's what Mr. Miziak was sort of touching on in terms of the transition piece. The longer periods, I can get a lot more done, especially sort of project-based elective type classes as well, rather than stopping and starting all the time. I mean, that's one of the benefits. Current thinking on this: design a schedule that permits the greatest number of students to get the requested electives. We want to maintain what we have for our kids. they're entitled to that. And we have a great number of offerings for them here at the high school that we want to maintain for them with this new schedule. Ensure that elective courses are sustainable and have the appropriate meeting rooms, and again, back to meeting rooms and space. So again, we want to have those electives for them. We don't want to lose any of those. We want them to have the opportunities to take the things that they want to take beyond simply the required graduation requirements that they are, that they have to take to graduate. Other consideration for a mock schedule: study halls is always a consideration. VOTEC students, we certainly have those students here that leave, either from the morning to go there or come from the VOTEC here for the afternoon. We have internship programs that run all year round, or the new program that Mr. Brum implemented last year as a pilot that's now we're working through now. Again, that take place at the end of the school year for a 4-week period. These are other considerations that we have to look at. Tutorial time we've talked about for our students and having our teachers available for them as best as they possibly can be, given the new schedule. And again, back to maximizing professional time for staff. I cannot stress enough how much the staff want to be able to meet together collaboratively, to work together. And I can tell you, in visiting the other schools you went to see, those opportunities are at those schools for those teachers. It was one of the main focuses that they talk about, that they're able to meet collaboratively in these other schools with these other schedules with their colleagues, to be able to plan effectively for instruction. Other challenges we might have: traveling teachers we have to consider that might be shared from William Manning or some of the elementary schools that might come here and split time. We have those teachers here. Staff development, would be a new endeavor. I mean, we have the majority of the staff here that have taught in a 42-minute period for the majority of their career. Now we're looking at a different paradigm where they have to teach for 55 to 60 minutes every day. So we have to provide them with professional development. That's a giving, to have them trained to be able to deliver that type of model. And it's not simply just adding on to your class another 15 minutes. It's a whole different design to deliver that instruction. And of course, crafting a master schedule that meets all the requirements for students and staff. The goal here is to keep what we have, maintain what we have, and improve on what we have for the betterment of our students and our staff. Because those are our most important commodity here with this type of endeavor. I have here a sample student schedule that I put up. You can see here that the sciences are in blue. I gave a schedule of a student here who has orchestra, and that's in red. You can see that, and of course the core subjects like English, math is geometry, the schedule. The history class has a world language, Spanish 2, and an art elective. Here's a situation where a student on A day would have an extra science or their biology lab, would come out of part of the unit lunch like Mr. Miziak explained before, and on a C day, let's say, this student would have their lunch and maybe go to their section or music lesson during the last half of their unit lunch, so that it wouldn't interfere with their science lab. Again, all the core subjects are here, and you can see leveraging the unit lunch for this student for the extra science lab and for the music lesson or sectional for them. Now, will every student have this type of schedule? No. If I don't have orchestra or band or some sort of chorus, then I wouldn't be coming out of lunch to do it, okay? Or if I don't have a science that requires an extra lab type period, a science period, I wouldn't be doing that as well. I think it's the CP conceptual, right? But here's a situation where a student has obviously both a science that has an extra lab period and a orchestra class that would have a music lesson or section. And you can see that these rotate. English period 1 is the first thing part of the day on an A day. Now it's the second period of the day on a B day, third period of the day on a C day, and then drops out on D day. And then you go back to A day, which would be your first period day. In the afternoon, history is 5th period, so it would be first afternoon block section. On an A day, B day would be the second one. On a C day would be the last period of the day for this student. And then on a D day it would drop out, and this would continue to rotate for these students.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. Do kids have an 8-period schedule or a 9-period schedule?
It's 8 periods.
That's not possible.
Well, the 9th period is your lunch period.
So they still have a 9-period schedule.
Yes, lunch is the 9th period.
Gotcha,
You have still the 8 scheduled classes.
gotcha.
Okay. Now here's a sample teacher schedule, for instance. I believe this teacher has free preps, honors pre-calc, AP calc, and pre-calc. We have an A, B, C, and D day, if you will. You can see that for this teacher, for an A day, they're teaching periods 1, 3, 5, and 7, and they have a lunch prep and tutorial weaved in. Prep second period, their lunch would be during the unit lunch, tutorial would be the 6th period. And again, this is just an example. On a B day, they would have a duty when 4th drops in. Their honors pre-calc they'd be teaching. And their prep would roll down to now period 2 on a B day. 3rd block, lunch, teach, and a tutorial last period of the day. Okay? C day. There's 2 and 6 disappear. They're teaching. Their duty now rolls down to the 2nd block. Teaching here, lunch, teach. And this is probably an issue. They've got 5 teaching periods here during this day. Again, that's how the rotation would work. And then on D day, the prep now rolls up to period 2. Calc, duty, lunch, tutorial, calc, and calc. 4 teaching periods that day with prep, duty, and tutorial. Now that doesn't mean, and I've talked about leveraging unit lunch, but let's say we wanted this math teacher, part of his department, to have lunch duty. Well, maybe we have the duty here, and they're eating lunch either before or after. Those are some of the options that we're looking at to try to leverage that unit lunch so that we can have duty coverage during the lunch, or maybe the tutorial rolls up into lunch, and the lunch period is now after the unit lunch for that particular teacher. So those are all the different iterations we're going to have to take a look at in order to leverage that unit lunch, to have the coverage, to have the tutorial period, and have the PLC period for these teachers. And there's a lot of work that has to go into that. But this is just a sample of this. I think Mr. Marcari, you were stepping up for this one. These are just
Yes. I think these are high schools using rotating drop.
correct. There it is.
Right. That's slide.
So it's not like it's not out there. This is what the purpose of this slide is.
Okay. So, right. Let's see. So this is kind of circling back, back to the why, with the master schedule being the how. And this has been going on, like I said, for quite some time. So we've accumulated a lot of reasons over the years. And, even going back to last year's efforts in our strategic plan, kind of adding more to the mix with everything that we've got going on these days with our students and the amount that they're trying to manage and juggle in terms of their overall workload. So I think that really highlighted, kind of put a final piece into the puzzle when we worked on this last year, that we really wanted to make this shift, something that we've been talking about for a long time. We really want to try to make a reality. So that's really the why. So, kind of a final footnote. Obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, this is, I don't even want to say we're dealing with wet concrete. We're still mixing the sand and the water and the Portland cement, right? We're just putting these ingredients together, and we're trying to mix this thing up and deal with a lot of the issues that you heard about tonight. Obviously, we want help. We need help, we need feedback, we want to hear from you as parents, we want to hear from students, obviously questions from board members. The faculty obviously needs to, help us get involved in this and figure out what's the best way to deal with some of these issues. You have to balance out schedules for students and for staff. You got to manage duties. You got to make lunch work. But I think that if we work together, we're going to come out on top with something that's really going to be much better than what we're working with right now. So before we kind of start getting into some conversation, I need to give you a heads up on a couple things. So first of all, a lot of these folks are starting their day at 6:30, so I promised them, hey, listen, let's aim for an 8:30 end. I know that we talked a lot tonight, so hopefully we can spend the last half an hour or so just hearing from you guys. Before we open it up a little bit, I'll just kind of moderate a little bit, and Ms. Fox was kind enough to take notes on your questions. But I did want to pitch that there's a limited amount of time tonight, but remember that you can always email me your thoughts about these things. I'll probably get back to you with a note that says something like, thanks for your input, we'll add it to the list of things that we're thinking about, okay? So if I don't get to your question tonight, please don't be offended. There is going to be another opportunity to talk about this very same topic, again in March. Kind of gives us some time to work on, to schedule some more, keep crafting, keep running mock schedules with our student information system. As the system generates and runs, try to come up with a maximum of scheduled students. That's part of what we're doing. So we do have this next meeting scheduled, and again, if your question doesn't get picked up tonight, feel free to email it to me, and we'll take everybody's input into consideration. Okay. So with that said, what do you think? I know we have some students here, and I asked them to write down their names for me, so don't be embarrassed, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming out. I really appreciate that you came. Because it's late. It's late, and I know you guys always have a lot to do, so I just want to say thanks. And you got your names down here, so I don't know if we got free ice cream tomorrow or something. Gotta help these guys out. But if you guys have anything that you want to share as students, if you're thinking of trying to get out of here and you want to say something before you go, obviously feel free. Just do one of these and we'll recognize you. Otherwise, what are your thoughts? Honestly, board members, yes, sir.
First of all, I think it's a huge undertaking, so God bless you for taking this on and not stay with the status quo. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of positives here, and some background in scheduling and all that, so I really appreciate all of the things that you've done with this. Going back to the success rate, you said the current success rate, by adding the full classroom, you go from 60% to 90%. What's the current success rate for students to get their courses that they want?
Last year was probably mid-70s, 70%.
Really? So
right.
Yeah, so what happens is the algorithm, right? The software is running an algorithm to try to get the student schedule. And at some point, you might move a class to this period, move a class to that period, make it from fall semester to spring semester. And you're moving the pieces around, trying to get more and more students scheduled in until you get to like diminishing returns, right? It's the point where it's like, it ain't getting any better than 75%. And that's roughly where we were last summer. And then we said, okay, that's as good as the software is going to do for us. Now we have to go in and start hand scheduling and filling out the rest of the kids' schedule. So at the presentation in October, actually, the gentleman they came and explained, look, you can hit that 70 to 80% range. That's okay, and you can run from there, and you can usually do the hand scheduling to get to 100%, so that all students have something during all periods. Not necessarily first requests on electives, but we fill their schedules, right? Space is a consideration in that issue. If you have more rooms, it can be a little bit easier to do things. So we are looking at that. We did look at an addition of 4 classrooms over a new kitchen survey to try to have more room space. So obviously, you add more rooms, it gets a little easier to let the system fill more classes. But we are in the process, as Mr. Krause pointed out, we just got a demographers update in the last few weeks, so we've got to look at that. We've got enrollment projections. There is a trend of declining enrollment. The question is just how much, and how much of the decline in enrollment translates to the need for less sections of courses, so you need less classrooms. So we're trying to figure all that out.
A couple comments or recommendations or question. I grew up, I had a block schedule, and that did seem to work well. One thing that was different from this, I mean, it wasn't easy, that was different, was that the first period and last, I think, 2 periods were the same every day, and that was done for the sake mostly of language and mathematics. And those are 2 areas that developmentally do tend to benefit the most from having daily. So I know that doesn't really, can't have everything with every plan, but just to keep that in the back of your mind, if there are ever any half days or a day where there's an extra slot, to maybe prioritize the languages and or mathematics so that students get additional touch points on those subjects. Because about the mind in those particular areas does seem to benefit from it. So to keep that in the back of your own mind.
Can I ask just how long were the periods that you had?
I think they were like an hour and a half. I can check. I mean, I was in high school long.
So like, okay, all right.
Yeah, I can try to check.
Okay.
I was a kid. I wasn't really paying that much attention, but I do know that did work well for labs and every other reason you're doing. So the first grade was the same every day. Then we had the main academic subjects, and 2 of them had a long period before lunch, and then after lunch there were 2 periods. Yeah, so it would rotate 8 days. So the second thing I want, I mean, even college, I think, had like language components there, like maybe language labs, an optional thing. The second thing I wanted to note was I noticed in the order of the classes with the rotations, it's probably for staffing that you kept the like 3 or 4 classes that were before lunch, you were taking before lunch, and 3 or 4 classes that were after lunch, you were taking after lunch. And so like one day the classes were 4, 1, 2, 8, 5, 6, and I mean, it seems very unnecessarily confusing to remember the order, but also it takes away the potential benefit of if someone's not a morning person, that if it were like 1, 4, 5, 6, and then the next day 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 5, I can't do it with the alarm, then you would have math at the end of the day sometimes at least. And it also just keeps the order of the classes the same for students who might have some executive functioning issues. I'm sure you're balancing it with a lot of other things. I just wanted to point out that seems like an unnecessary complication for the student who's keeping track of their own schedule, but if it's the only way it works for staff, then so be it. And the other comment is with this one large lunch grade, I think another benefit that you just put in that nice list you have is that it opens up the opportunity, as mentioned to couple individually, the board is that some clubs might have the option of meeting then, which opens it up to people who can't get there early and or can't stay late. So it's, keep that in the hopper as well. It's a nice opportunity. And then the recommendation I had was you mentioned about all the options for lunch, about the tables here and there, and they all sound fine. I think I would be more comfortable, or other people would be more comfortable. We actually saw like an account of like literally like one day. Let's just see where everyone fits, an estimate, so that we're not just saying like, okay, it seems like it would probably work. In the lunch, because the students need to feel like they have a place to go, even if it's a gym, that they're not going to not have a place to sit down. And then the question I had was just more basic on the curriculum. You mentioned that you might make the CP science go down to 5 credits due to the lab issues, which is fine. But how does that affect the students' overall schedule? Do they need to take an extra science to do that, or they just, it does not really affect anything, they just graduate?
Okay, so that was a lot. Let's try real quick. So for one answer, we do have part-time Btboe students, right? So every day, their schedule in the morning needs to be the same so that in the afternoon, they can get to the Btboe and do their Btboe activities. So that's why we can't swap out morning and afternoon classes, because they need to have the same schedule, AM, PM, even if it varies within AM and PM. So that's one thing. With respect to the cafeteria and the seating and the dining, I agree with you. We're going to work on that. That's in progress.
The other one was that the rotation could be confusing for students. And going to these schools and talking to multiple kids and principals, the answers, they get used to it pretty quickly. That they really haven't found that it's been really an issue for them, whether it's posted on the TV in the morning or what have you, they get used to it pretty quickly. It's really done.
Yeah, and you'll see like a lot of times on every corner in the hallways, A day, B day, C day, D day. These are the periods. So really, there's a lot of visual aids, and you can just remember it's an A day. You can remember it's an A day, there's enough visual aids, and I know this because my daughter, I think she's got some executive functions. But she went through this, yeah, is she here? It's going to be on YouTube, my daughter's going to be texting me. Yeah, no, I actually, I was getting something to eat. This is what happens when your kids go to school, right? They're gone, right? And so weird things happen, like singers that you never heard of before stick in your head, and I recognized an Ed Sheeran song on the radio. My daughter came to mind because that's what she was in. But anyway, so she did this for her first. They switched. I think she was a sophomore, and in her junior year they switched at the school she was attending to rotating drop. And you know, like Mr. Krause says, they do get used to it. But I think a lot of visual aid helps them. It goes a long way. The other thing I wanted to mention, you were talking about language arts in the morning every day, math in the afternoon every day, or vice versa. One of the things we talked a lot about too is the fact that there are strange days that happen, whether it's an in-service day, whether it's a planned early dismissal, what have you. And what can we do creatively? And maybe we just call it, you know, a ridge day or whatever. And you throw in an occasional day where maybe you meet with all of your classes. You know, now obviously, if you're going to meet with all of your classes, those classes are going to be a lot shorter than what you saw here, because you still have to have lunch in the middle of the day if it was a full day. If it was an abbreviated scheduled day, right, you might do something like that too. So there may be some opportunities to do something like that. Somebody else?
Could you please clarify again what actually has been decided at this point? I know you're inviting input, but I'm under the impression that certain decisions have already been made.
Right.
The district has already decided to move ahead with the rotating drop schedule. There is already a timeline in place for the rollout.
Yes.
I think over the summer, someone already presented plans for the extension,
Yes.
which is the kind of $7 million elephant in the room that nobody's mentioned this evening.
Yes.
So some decisions have already been made. So it would just be great if you could say, okay, this is what's already been decided,
Right.
and these are the areas we're still looking for input, because earlier when it was like, oh, nothing's set in stone, I feel like there are quite a few things already decided.
Right, so sure. So we want to do the rotating drop schedule, not next year, but the year after. That's our plan, right? That's the decision. As Mr. Krause pointed out, we did look at A day, B day, alternating days, larger, longer periods. That is on the back burner, and I don't have any thought in my mind that we would go to that unless for some reason, in this process of running the schedule and working with the staff to try to get the kinks worked out, we realize, oh my God, this would be so much better. Okay, I don't see that happening based on the work that we've done so far, even with the mock schedule that we've run and reported out on in October. The success rate at 90% with some extra space, right, leads me to believe we're not going to have a problem getting there to a rotating drop schedule. So that is a decision. A decision about an addition, we made a decision to have plans designed and to have an architect design these plans, put the specifications together, and see what came back in bids, okay? That has not been reviewed yet by the Board of Ed, and the only way that addition happens is if the Board of Ed approves awarding a contract to have that built. In the meantime, of course, we did have this demographer's report come back with some declining enrollment numbers that we weren't really expecting to see, frankly. So that has to be balanced out in consideration, because obviously, you know, nobody wants to make a recommendation to add 4 classrooms if you're not going to need them in 3 years, right? And that's you know, yeah, that's an elephant in the room, sure. I mean, I certainly don't want to say to the board, hey, let's go spend $7 million, and then, you know, 2 years after the $7 million is spent, people are saying, well, wait a minute, you just, you know, let a couple teachers go, you reduce class size, you reduce the number of classes you're running because you don't have as many students, And why'd you add that space, right? So that is something that's going to be a critical decision over the next couple months. We're going to have to go closer to that. Absolutely.
To kind of one question. What's going to happen to students who have food allergies if you have kids eating all the meals because they don't all fit in this category?
Sure. Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer, right? But I can tell you that right now, there are children in this building that have food allergies, and there's eating that goes on all over the building. So, I don't really know that the scenario changes all that much, to be honest with you. I think that the important thing is that we work closely with the families and the students for those that have allergies of any kind or other medical issues, and we have appropriate individual health care plans, and we make sure that we're prepared to respond if necessary. And I think that's just the honest reality of what happens in a high school of 1,800 students, to be candid with you. But I certainly appreciate it is a different context to have knowing that you're going to have more food spread out. Cleanliness is going to be an issue. We know that in the context of setting up a unit lunch, there are a lot of logistical hurdles that have to take place that were alluded to about, well, where are the kids going to be located? Where are they going to sit? How are you going to set that up? How are you going to set it up? How are you going to clean it up? Right? So we know that we are looking at needing more staff, specifically around that unit lunch period, whether it's more folks helping to prepare the food for the students, more folks to distribute food to students at perhaps a kiosk in the smaller old gym, a kiosk in the larger new gym, maybe a little bit of sales in the foyer area in front of the new gym, perhaps something down near the pack, depending on what happens in the long run. So we know that there's some staffing issues. We've looked at those issues in the past, kind of analyzed anticipated costs, and that's another factor, right? Because if you build the addition and you have a whole new kitchen compared to maybe expanding this kitchen, you're probably going to need more staff to run a whole new kitchen than you are going to need to run a larger kitchen, right? And so your annual expense of dealing with the staff to run that whole operation, put tables out for kids, clean things up for the classes that are supposed to go into the gym in the next period, it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. But we really look at all the positives that can come out of this, and if it takes some extra grunt work to make lunch work, I think it's worth it.
My only other concern is that I have two kids, one of whom has already graduated in sophomore in college, and the other one is a freshman here at Ridge, and they both have learning disabilities. And I am looking at that schedule and thinking, neither one of my boys are going to be able to tolerate that. The executive functioning skills that's going to be required to keep track of what day it is, what period it is, which schedule is. He's going to need to be shifted from an ICS program into a more restrictive environment, because there's no way he's going to be able to keep track of all of the schedule changes, and it's going to be too long. An extra 20 minutes of class time is an enormous amount for a kid who struggles with ADHD and barely manages to stay focused for 42 minutes as it is already. So I'm thinking, I'm going to need to push for him to be in a more restricted environment because of this schedule. And I'm going to need to have OT services again, which we gave up when he went to middle school because he seemed to get the hang of the schedule there. But I'm thinking now there's no way that he's going to function without that. So now we're talking about requiring more services from the district, which is going to cost you more money. And it's going to put him in more restricted placement, which he hasn't needed up until this point in time.
Right.
He has biology right now, and he hates biology. Not because he dislikes biology, but because it's a period and a half on lab days. And he says to me, I can't get through my lab because I just can't stay focused for that long. It's just too long a period of time. And now all of his classes are going to be that long. I'm thinking he's going to have to be required to be out that seat and leave the classroom in the middle of class, because I took all those things out when he went to middle school because he changed periods every 40 minutes, unlike in elementary.
Right. So
he didn't need those accommodations, and now, you know, have to put the wall in.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't want to make the meeting about any one individual student's IEP, right? But in fairness, there's a reason why we have IEPs, right? They're supposed to be individualized to meet the needs of the student. There's a child study team that works with the family to try to come up with the right plan for each child. You know, and I can say that in terms of ICS classes, for example, there's a reason that there's an ICS teacher there, and there's extra staff in the room to help support the students and say, hey, don't forget this is where you're going now. You know, and not for nothing, you know, right now when you have an extra lab period for biology, you're taking two 42-minute classes together, right? So now you're up to 84 minutes. We're not going to exceed 58 minutes tops, best case scenario in this schedule. I mean, listen, if we didn't need to run 58 minutes for lunch and we could get lunch down to 50 minutes, that gives us 8 minutes to spread out in the rest of the day. That's not going to take you far from 56. Maybe you get to 57, 58. So, I mean, I appreciate the needs, and it's very important that when we're dealing with individual students, we meet the needs of the individual and we meet the needs of the institution. So our plan will be to work with families to do just that. Okay? So teachers, Marguerite.
So as a counselor, I have concerns about when I will see my students. So if, right now, I often see students during their lunch period.
Yeah.
Can't see 255 kids
Right.
in the same lunch period.
Yeah.
So I'm worried about when I would see students and how pulling them from academics is going to have even more of an impact because they don't have that academic class every day. So for me to pull them from an academic period is going to have a more substantial impact than it might have in this current schedule. So that's one of my concerns. The second concern that I have is how the schedule will work for things that don't rotate easily. So you have a kid who's doing an internship, for example, and they leave here and they go to Cedar Hill in the afternoon, and they leave for 2 periods, and those 2 periods are supposed to be periods 8 and 9, but they're not now. Now they're periods, I can't remember what they were, but you get the point.
Yeah.
And then classes, for example, that don't meet 5 days a week. So classes like math, algebra seminar, geometry seminar, study skills, 3 days a week. So how are they going to become all 5-day-a-week classes, which means students can't take advantage of 2 of them, which they're able to do now? Or are we going to have some sort of a way of those rotating, even though they're not a full
Right.
5
So,
days?
yeah, I think those are all great points. The seminar in particular. One of the things with respect to unintended consequences, right, that we were talking about was, for example, right now, as the team described a little bit of, you have students that are taking a study hall, and then one period of that study hall is being used to go to a science lab, right? Well, what if you don't need a period of study hall to go to science lab because you're only taking it out of lunch? So that's all your CP students and all your honor students in all likelihood. I think that's the direction that we're headed. So now, if those students had a study hall that they had in their schedule to accommodate a lab, but now they don't need that in their schedule to accommodate their lab, how many of those students would want to keep that study hall or take an elective? I don't know, right? So that's an interesting question. But one of the things that you described, and I think it's a great point for counselors, and I know Stephanie has brought this up, is that question, well, when am I going to meet with the students because I don't have the lunchtime opportunities? So one of the things I asked the team to do was take a look at how many students right now are in study halls, right? To what extent do study halls represent an opportunity for meeting with a counselor, right? Such that you're not pulling them out of a class to do a meeting because you're not going to meet with everybody during unit lunch, obviously. So, I think that's an analysis that's really important. I know you guys have worked on it, and I don't want to say, but they've started to take a look at that because, that's one of the questions too, like how many of the kids in the building have a study hall 5 days a week, 4 days a week, 3 days a week, depending on their schedule, right? So it may require more of a sensitivity to say, okay, I've got to take the students that are mine and maybe I build a little spreadsheet that shows me when they have study hall 2, and I have to kind of pick and choose a little bit more carefully than I did before when I could always just grab them at lunch. I don't know, but it's a good point, something that we need to work on too. I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I happened to be working at Watchung Hills as a teacher when they adopted this schedule, so I know, I lived through it before, and it works, but science is a challenge, and there's a couple of challenges that I see. You know, you lose minutes, and those minutes may be partially made up by less passing periods, but now you're teaching, right now in the present schedule, 33% of our time is on lab days, you know, 2 out of 6 periods. Right? And when on the rotational schedule, our time now is 43% because it'll be 1.5 out of every 3.5 days, right? You'll see per rotation 3.5 days, and then you're going to see them for 1.5 days. So it's 43% of your time is on lab days. Unless you are doing content on lab days, you cannot get through the curriculum. It's not like you're just going to do a lab every rotation and expect to get through the same amount of content. It's not going to happen. Right. So that's a concern. Another concern is PLC time for science teachers. You know, you have that in the unit, and where is that going to end up happening? And I know Watchung Hills has a prep and a productivity period built into their schedule. So if you're starting to ask tutorial periods and, you know, things of that nature, the schedule, like I saw the fictitious math teacher had contact periods every single period on C day on that schedule. So, you know, and then also the constraints of, you know, not scheduling a full, what is it, 1, 2, 3, and 5. And you can't schedule 3 and 5 because the science teacher's got to you can't back them in both sides of lunch.
Right. Yep.
And some of our rooms don't have like a full lab worth of equipment. And most teachers, science teachers over there, have like a full operating lab that they don't share with other people. We share a lot of rooms, and so, and we don't have any storage space, especially in the 313, 314 rooms. The storage space is really limited, so it would just be a concern about how much room sharing would have to be going on and running labs, you know, because if you're running lab A in that room on one day, you can't expect the third teacher in the latter half of the day to switch it over to a different lab over a lunch period.
Right, so this might give those of you that do not live here every day a little insight into why science is such a huge challenge for us. It's a staffing challenge, it's a space challenge, it's a facility challenge, it's a lab room challenge, it's an equipment challenge. It is a big challenge for us every year, and we find, you might have heard early on, science driving the whole master schedule in a lot of ways, with the way that we have to dovetail labs and the way that we have to share labs. It's a big, big challenge, right? So what we're trying to do is figure out, is there some way to make this challenge an easier lift? And obviously we have to sit down with the science teachers and say, hey, you know, here's a run. Now let's place teachers with this run and see what their schedules actually look like. And we know it's going to continue to be a challenge. And we have to work with you guys to see if we can come up with a better mousetrap, because, you know, obviously that's the goal, right? There's still going to be trade-offs. Any schedule is going to have trade-offs. There's just no two ways about it, right? But we're trying to get to something that's better overall than what we've got now. But I appreciate everything you're saying. You're spot on, and you know, I'm constantly challenging Tom with these questions. Well, what about this and what about that? And he's saying, oh, well, what about this and what about that? So we got to work with you guys, and we got to see what we can come up with. When it comes to a run that's at like 90%, well, that's great. The kids are in the classes. Now put the teachers in the rooms in play and see how it shakes out, right? So it is going to be a challenge. I couldn't agree with you more. The PLC thing we talked about, and I think that's an issue that as you make the teacher schedules, you can try to find those opportunities to be together, even if it's just for a course. You know, when can the bio teachers be together? When can the physics teachers be together? When can the chem teachers be together? Even if you can't get the whole science department together at the same time. You know, can we at least create a better crossover there? So it's a big lift. Yeah, absolutely.
So 2 things. I know that you mentioned you're hypothesizing about alternate schedules on anticipated early closures and stuff like that, but have you considered what you're going to do on unanticipated closures? So like weather-related closings, et cetera, because I know that some schools, when they have these schedules, just consider it a blackout day, like, oh, okay, school's canceled, we just pick up where we should have been on the next day. And that's obviously a loss of instructional time for teachers who have that day planned, versus other districts who say, oh, okay, no, we're just going to shift the entire calendar. And so even though Thursday was supposed to be a C day, it's now a B day kind of thing.
We've had some conversation about that. I've advocated more for saying, hey, this was supposed to be an A day. The next day we're back in school is an A day, for the reason that you talked about. I have colleagues that have taught in districts that have schedules similar to this, and there can be years where you're just unlucky, and if you don't do that, you miss like 5 or 6 classes in the winter, and if you're trying to get your kids ready for, AP whatever exam, you're pulling your hair out, because you can't afford to give up. So, I mean, I think we're pretty much on the same page with thinking that that's the direction we would want to go with that.
And then just the second is, so I know space is an issue, but have you considered the space challenges associated with teacher prep time? Because we currently have very limited space, and if we're going to squeeze even more in this bag, we're losing even more empty classes, which are effectively workspaces for teachers. And so if we are making that change, where will we go on prep periods?
There's a student.
I have a quick comment to make about students.
Yes.
Marcus.
I actually quite like the training classes. It's kind of like similar to in part testing days in middle school, where you rotate classes every day. It's a nice change in your schedule. It's refreshing, I think, to have different classes every day. If you're too out of schedule, I feel like it would make students less tired as well, because going through every day, the same day every day, it makes you kind of tired physically as well, to try to focus.
Get a little bit in a rut sometimes.
Yeah.
I know we had a parent down here who was.
I had a rotating drop schedule in high school, and I actually loved it. We had actually 6 rotating days, we only dropped 1 class, and it is a challenge in the beginning, but like you said, like pick it up real quick. And I can start to remember the rotation of the days even now, and that was quite a bit ago.
We can make up songs and jingles.
Like we had letters, so it was like different letters. But question I had about the CP science, does that still count? Like as a lab science, if they're not meeting that?
Yeah, so I talked to Tom about that a lot actually, and it speaks a little bit to one of the other issues I was hearing, and that is sort of that idea of a lab day versus not a lab day, and can we kind of change that dynamic a little bit from the perspective of, well, yes, we have to share labs, we have to coordinate that, you have to figure out when you're doing a lab and when you're not, as a teacher working together. And as a student, this expectation in my mind that, oh, I have this double period today, that's my lab day, right? Do we really need to have that same mindset if we're at 56, 57 minutes? How many of the labs that we've got in our curriculum really can't be done in 50 minutes, right? And so if we're able to kind of look at labs from that perspective, maybe we can be a little bit more flexible and just think of it as the overall time to teach the content and the labs. And to your point, CP conceptual will still have labs in it. We're not saying that it's a lab-free course now. It's just that it's not going to have extra periods to do the lab. That's one of the things that we talked about. But definitely there will still be labs.
2 more quick things. I also was concerned about the lack of that 8th and 9th period for seniors to be able to do internship job. Like I don't know how it's going to work. And then I guess my last question or comment is one of the benefits we keep saying for the students, aside from the rotation, which is a nice change of the day, but also that you can sort of say to yourself, oh, I have an extra day to get this assignment done or something like that. But how are teachers going to react to that? Is the reaction going to be like, okay, now you have 2 days to do one assignment, or is it going to be like, oh, well, now that you have 2 days, this assignment, now we're going to... Right, exactly. That's not how it's supposed to work. So like, again, and hopefully in the staff development, things like that can be discussed. That's just a bit of a.
We didn't really speak to that particular issue of the PD aspect of this, but obviously, we need to partner with the teachers in every way to make this work really well. And I think if we do that, we're all going to be happier with the result at the end of the day, but PD has to be a big part of that. I haven't heard from board members at all. What do you guys have?
As a parent of two students as seniors who have participated in the senior internship program, I've looked at this pretty closely, and I think especially for the students that intern in the school district, I think our partner schools are unbelievably cooperative, and I've really scrutinized this, and I think it can work. It just has to have flexibility, and the intern and the teacher or professional that they're interning with is going to need from them weekly as they journal and they report it and they log their time. These are the periods, so I'm going to be a little specific here and just say, if your student is supposed to go 7th and 8th period, I think that's kind of what Mrs. Cahill was saying. So in an A day, they would only be gone 7th period because 8th period would be not happening that day. So that would be an hour that day. But if you're going to an elementary school, that school day lasts longer than an hour. So, or past that time. So you have time to spend, like my student does, spend at Cedar Hill past 2:25. And then the same thing would happen on the next day. And then it would be the third day where 7 and 8 would come in right after lunch. That would be your day where you have a problem. And maybe you can't go that day, or maybe you partner up with lunch, you double up with lunch, or maybe you walk over for those 2 periods and come back if you're lucky enough to be at Cedar Hills. But it can work.
Right, or maybe you're partnered with a teacher, a different teacher.
Right, exactly.
And you spend some of your time with one teacher and some of your time with another teacher because those 2 teachers are on different schedules. And sometimes your schedule matches better with them on this day, and other days might match better with a different teacher.
It actually does happen now, even just because of schedules that we have.
Yeah,
And I would just add that I'm totally passionate about this, so I don't want to sound dispassionate, but currently, right now, 12 seniors are doing this. So I don't want this to be something that is a hurdle to changing something for 1,800, for the full year.
Right, versus the springtime.
For 1,850 students.
Sure.
And then the whole end of year internship, which is new, which we know we are hopeful will grow, which obviously needs some attention and service.
Let me talk about the elephant in the room.
Sure.
I just want to reassure everyone to believe when we are spending inordinate amounts of time thinking about this and looking at this demographics data because we've been trying to track it and it hasn't been very easy with the affordable housing decisions for the town to know exactly what's happening. We're trying to follow as closely as possible, and so we have the latest reports and we're doing follow-up with the demographers to make sure that we think that these do the best projections for what's going to happen in our town with the enrollment over the next bunch of years. And so, yes, we're definitely considering all of these factors.
And on top of that, because of April, the builders trying to tell people that more people won't move into an apartment building if there's elevators for the children. That's his argument. So, yeah, will not. So that's also for the registry. There are people telling you that. Well, New York City's in it. So, it's hard to get straight information from people who are trying to build things bigger. You don't have the correct.
The demographer is trying to use the data from our own town, who lives in the housing in our town, not from other towns, because obviously every town's different.
Because people move in, what type of housing ready to get the children here, so we have to.
All right, so we're at 8:40. We're over a little bit, but we do have another meeting coming up in March. And like I said, if there's something that you think of, like, oh, I wonder if they thought of this, you can always shoot me a note. We can add it to our Q&A and try to develop something that, there is a Q&A that's posted on our website as well. It kind of shows sort of some running questions that we selected and posted answers to. So thank you guys all so much for coming out tonight. Come back out in March. Yep.
December 2nd, please.
December 2nd is, so actually, thank you. The next BT Connect meeting, okay, and I'm trying not to advertise for the next meeting until the current one is over, right? So what you're going to hear from me this Friday is about the next BT Connect meeting, which doesn't go back to this because this one doesn't repeat again until March. But the next BT Connect meeting is December 2nd, and that one is on the subject of school start times, which is all the rage, as you may know, in terms of what's good for kids in what time we expect them to show up, especially our older students at the high school level. So we're going to have a conversation about that on December 2nd. So stay tuned. Yeah, it'll be evening as well. And I will send that information out on Friday.